Gary, you look very fit.
I think I'm doing good here, Don. We are now live, and I like to welcome everyone to another episode of Coffee and Codeless with me, Gary Hoberman. And today we're going to do something very different. So typically I bring world-class leaders to say, how did they get to where they are? And today we have Don Callahan, who I worked for. I'm going to say way underneath, Don. I'm going to say, but worked for and had the privilege to get to know because I became. I think you called me Q at some point. I think the
I
James.
did.
I'm
I
hoping James
did.
Bond theme, and I got to know very well while I was at Citigroup as an MD. And the perspective here is going to be unique. Is we get to hear Don's story from his side, but I'm going to actually give you my story as an employee under Don and what I saw from leadership and this is all about leadership. So Don, like when we first met, it was at Citigroup. You were global head of all operations technology. I think it was probably 170,000, 200,000 people, or it's something like that when we first met.
Yeah.
And the market was didn't yet fall down from the recession, but you were the one managing through all of that in the regulation, which was an impossible feat, and I got to be part of that. Just Don, since you left City, and we'll go back to that. Like you're on the board of Time and Tata. What? Tell me all the boards you're on. What's been keeping you busy on that
Well,
side?
I'm lucky to be on a whole series of boards, and I do that, Gary. And thank you for having me on. And it was a real honor to have a chance to work with you. I'll come back into that, what a treat it was, and why I called you Q. In terms of my boards, as it relates to leadership, I'd highly encourage everyone listening to try to get on boards because you can surround yourself with all sorts of different people, and as a result, all sorts of different views. And I've done that early in my career. I still remember when I was back at Morgan Stanley, I joined the Red Cross board so I could give something, but at the same time, I realized how much I was getting back. I'm on a public board. I'm on Scotiabank's board up in Toronto, a tech forward board. I'm on a fintech board, which I'll be at next week on the New York Stock Exchange called WEX. A lot of fun. I do private equity, so I'm on a series of boards there where I try to really help out as long as we own the a company. I just left the Tata TCS board to change positions so I could be more broadly dispersed across the Tata group there. And then I'm on a series of private boards where I am an investor and I own a part of the company. And so I sit on those boards. Most of those are all around AI, as you'd imagine. So it's fun. It puts me in maximum learning curve, which is what I like. It's where I like to be.
I love it, and you always loved technology, and that's so. Don, let's start back before I met you at Citi. So there was Morgan Stanley. Was it Old Lane? Like walk back. Like I think IBM before that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Just
IBM.
let's start with like yeah.
It's strange. I really started out at IBM. I thought I'd gone to school in Europe for a little bit, and I came back and I thought I'd go to law school. My grandfather was actually a pretty famous judge, and I thought I'd follow down that path. And I went to work at a law firm. And the first case I was put on was satellite business systems, which is of course about IBM getting into the satellite business and antitrust against IBM for if it dominated communications as well as data, it would be too much for anything. So I very quickly got deep into the technology and the R&D labs, and I said, I don't want to go into law. I want to go into technology, which back then, this is late 70s. It was none of my friends would have taken that path because technology was not considered at all cool, right? That's all deep back basement type of stuff. And I loved it. I loved how tech worked. I loved learning how to code. I learned wiring boards and all that. And I loved the art of the possible as I got into it. So I was just fascinated by technology and still am. So yeah, I
Don, you
started
gotta
at
you gotta
IBM.
share.
I would
Yeah,
have.
share the story of the first portable computer. I loved when you that story of like the yeah, yeah first time you saw it in the train ride around that. I guess it would be
Yeah,
amazing.
you're absolutely right. I got to go to the product launch for the first what IBM called a luggable computer, and it was the size of a Singer sewing machine, and I give the IBM labs a lot of credit because they produced a machine, right? They're used to doing water cooled machines. They produced a machine that could actually be carried. Unfortunately, it didn't have power source. You had to plug it in. And I actually experimented and plugged it in on a train, not knowing whether it was going to blow up. But it didn't. And it was great. Years later, Gary, when I was director of strategy for IBM Japan, I ended up going out to the Yamato labs and I ended up seeing this wonderful team, guys with long ponytails, working on a black prototype that became the ThinkPad. So I got to work on that. I actually helped bring it to market because they needed some energy to get it out of the labs and into the market. And then years later, when I was at Morgan Stanley, I got to help out a bit it obviously transitioned from IBM to Lenovo. So in my career, I did a cradle to grave, and that product is still out there today with great performance, I might add.
You went from the vendor provider side of IBM selling Lenovo, and then went to Morgan Stanley as an employee. Would that be the next transition? And then
Yeah, that was it.
before,
I went to Morgan Stanley. I was called. I had managed Wall Street for IBM. I got to know a bunch of the people, and I got a phone call from one of the senior guys at Morgan Stanley saying, "Could I come over and have lunch?" This was in Tokyo, and I came over to have lunch, thinking they had some problems, and they said, "Yeah, we have a whole bunch of issues, and would you come here and fix them?" I was shocked, and I'd always been a fan of Morgan Stanley's, and I still am. And I said, that would be interesting to have to really not tell people what to do, but to actually do it. So I flipped sides and went to Morgan Stanley. I was brought in to help with strategy, and it worked out well. I had a wonderful time helping out at Morgan Stanley, and I still have a lot of friends there.
that's awesome. And then we met after that. I believe there's one stop in between before you joined at Citigroup. And
Yeah,
when you joined
Citigroup
there,
was
yeah,
a surprise phone call. I was joining there with Vikram Pandit, John Havens, to start an alternative investment business, something I've always been intrigued with. But as soon as we got there, the financial crisis started, and Citi ended up being in some really tough waters, choppy waters. And I was asked, Vikram was made the CEO, and I was asked to be the chief administrative officer and come in and help out and help right the ship. And it was very hard work. Luckily, I ended up picking up, among other things, technology. And I was confident the answer to righting the ship was for us to get the technology right, because a bank, of course, is really more of a tech company than it is just storing money. It's really about moving and managing the money.
yeah, and that's where, like, so here I am. I was joined Citi at Smith Barney days to Solomon to Citi, so literally 16 years total there. The When you entered, I'll never forget. Like, so the price of stock would be today with the 10x would be like 550 a share equivalent today versus what it is. And I remember it was dropping, dropping, dropping. And what I remember was one of the offsites, the earliest offsite you did in O&T for Ops and Tech. You went up there and you were talking about JFK and him visiting when they were actually getting ready to send a man to the moon, and the janitor story. Just if you could I remember that story of you sharing very clear to say, how do we inspire leaders? And this was the whole Ops and Tech leadership team I remember in this offsite.
Yeah,
And
no,
yeah,
it's a great story. I'm glad you brought it up. The reason I like the story, and I'll retell the story, is that it was really important. It's important for a leader to be able to have a vision and put that vision out there. So you've got to get the vision, and then you've got to communicate it clearly so that everyone can then be part of it. But underneath that vision has to be a mission. And if you think about what JFK had said, that he wanted to put a man on the moon within the decade and bring him back safely to Earth. So if you decompose that, you actually have a mission, right? You have the time frame, the decade, you have the destination, and so what was really important for JFK was that he make sure that it's actually being done. He didn't know how to do that, but we knew we had a extremely good collection of scientists, physicists, et cetera, in America, and a lot of them at NASA. So he got on the plane and flew down to NASA at the time, Cape Canaveral, and he walks in the lobby as the story is retold, and he sees a janitor in the corner with a mop, and he walks up to him and says, "Hi, I'm Jack Kennedy. What are you doing?" And the janitor puts the mop aside, and he said, "Why, I'm putting a man on the moon." And and,
I love it.
and Jack Kennedy couldn't believe it. He realized that the mission was clearly understood through everyone in NASA. And the way the story goes is he turned around and never did his review. He got back on Air Force One and headed back to DC. He knew that the mission was understood and people were working against it. And I think for leaders, the thing I was trying to get across to our leadership team at the time is it's not enough to have the vision. It's not enough just to have the mission. It's you have to make sure you're communicating, and then you have to actually test it to make sure that it's in the wood, as I would say.
I love it. So, Don, the next story, advance maybe a year or two, and we are all in the heat of that TARP days, if you remember well, and the regulators. And I remember presenting to all the regulators and all that go. And Citigroup announces they're going to create this engineers group or re-engineers group. And I was nominated, and I'm assuming you had a big part in that to say, I'll represent tech and globally, like we're going to re-engineer what the company is. And so I'm in the middle of 100 of the top leaders across this massive Wall Street company, and I remember my friend Jagdish looks over at me, he goes, "Gary, be aware, Don's about to come in and put you on the spot to do something, and it's going to be a huge effort." Like this was, and he was. I had no idea what was about to happen. So Don, you walked in front of the 100 re-engineers, and this is you basically described that you had dinner the night before with Tim Cook, and Tim at the end of the dinner took out his phone, took a picture of the receipt for the meal, and immediately turned and showed you it was processed, paid, and already in his account. And you did what we all did at that time at Citigroup, which was you went back to your assistant at that point and said, "Here's the receipt," and it gets taped to a piece of paper and faxed to a fax machine in Tampa. Someone picks it up off the fax machine, most likely questions the receipt, and comes back and forth. And I remember you walking in front, describing this exactly the way I just did, and said, "Gary, you've got 30 days to roll out that mobile app to everyone in City. So we eliminate the fax machines. We get out of this." And it's funny because I'm like, that's awesome. And at the same time, I'm like, that's impossible. Like what are we gonna so this is the JFK story a little bit following up. And I didn't own procurement. I had no clue of what procurement systems were there. I didn't, I didn't have any understanding of the payment space here and what we were doing. And so I started to just do some quick research when I went back. So this is from my perspective is I went back and I said, is there any apps that already do this before we go build something? Like, is there something in the market that we could just use today and deploy? And sure enough, I find we have an app that does this. It's, Concur, Ariba already does it. And then I call the head of procurement and I'm like, "Hey, by the way, can we quickly license this in the next 30 days?" And she goes, "What do you mean? It's already licensed. We just can't deploy it. It's been 9 months waiting on the shelf to deploy because security will hold it back." So I called the CISO of Citi, I remember, and I said, "Could you tell me what's holding back this app from rolling out?" And they said, multi-factor authentication. The vendor refuses to add multi-factor authentication to protect the data. And because of that, they said, "No, we will never roll it out." So I did what I probably shouldn't have done, which was I downloaded the app and I tried it on my personal device. And sure enough, Don, it didn't ask for a single credential of PI. There was no name, there was no socials, there was no credit card numbers, there was no. And I remember calling back the CISO and I asked a simple question and said, "Has anyone tried it?" Just before, because like I can't find any information in this that's privacy or concerns. And so it was rolled out in 2 weeks from that point of view. And it was just that question which killed me. And that was the why question, which no one asks, which is Well, why haven't we rolled it out? Well, really, has anyone ever tried it just to see? And that was the answer. So you got the app within the 30 days. I remember we launched it. Now I'm going to do another story. So fast forward a little bit.
But just to
Um,
decompose that for a second,
yes, please.
for those of you who are listening to Gary tell that wonderful story, you have me being unreasonable, right? Kind of like JFK, man on the moon in a decade and back. So I'm being unreasonable. I'm putting a big, hairy, audacious goal out there, and you've got to figure out how to get it, right? And going to the outside world was brilliant, and then not taking no as an answer was even more. Breaking through and still making sure things are safe and secure. But you got it to market. You brought it in. I think it's a terrific story on leadership.
Yeah, I find so many people don't ask those questions. They just accept the status quo. Everyone accept like, and you gotta challenge it. It's so here I am. I remember the day I said, Don, I'm leaving Citigroup for this amazing MetLife CIO opportunity. I'm going to manage 10,000 engineers, and you wished me well. There was no, it was an amazing relationship. Now I'm at MetLife and I'm invited to present to Citigroup's board of directors. And I was presenting the future of insurance, and it was a vision I had. And I was asked to do live demos, and I remember going back to the 390 Park building, and that's where the Citigroup headquarters was, the executive team. And I remember sitting down in the boardroom, and I had just gotten featured in Fortune magazine. It was the first CIO. I think they normally don't profile CIOs, but they had a full page on like what I was doing and driving at MetLife. It was called The Wall and this and that. Now Don walks into the room of the Citigroup board of directors and the entire leadership team of MetLife there, the CEO, and he has a copy of this magazine and comes running up to me to ask me to sign it. Now, that is in my mind. I don't know if you remember that, but it meant
Yeah.
the world to me. It was like one of those, like just incredible. Like you were cheering me on from that point of view, which was incredible.
Well,
And
it's a key
yeah,
key part, right? First off, I was very proud of you. I said I'd get back to why I called you Q. It was really the curiosity. If you think of the Bond movies, I happen to be a big believer in the whole series, right? But the curiosity of innovation and putting that out there is what you were when you ran the Innovation Center in New York. It was just different ways to think about it. So the fact that you had taken what is arguably one of the oldest industries of all time, insurance, and reinvented it in a way that people were just shocked, right? So I was proud of you. And a part of what I try to do is stay close to people and make sure they have a high level of understanding of how appreciative I am of what they do, because
yeah,
it's far better than
and
anything I could do. Right? That's clear.
and so and Don, like so the next story, this would be my final one, I would say from my perspective, is fast forward 5 years, MetLife leadership, C-suite, leave to create Uncork. I'm in this startup world where I am the foreign entity, right? Everyone's looking at me and going like, if you lasted a year in Citigroup, you can't be CEO of a startup. There's no way you've been institutionalized, is what they actually said. There's no way. So we're a year in, we have our first investor meeting. It was our first equivalent of like a analyst day for our investors. We had no clue what we were doing, but we scheduled it on the same day as our holiday party. It was our first ever holiday party in a borrowed office and small 3,000 square foot office. And and I invited my friends and family who helped me get there, including, of course, Don. And so here we are. We just wrapped up the meeting. Like we were all nervous presenting the vision of what Uncork's going to be and where we're going to go. And I'll never forget Don walking into this room out of nowhere. I don't know where it came out of. A bottle of champagne appears, one thumb, which I've never seen any, like one thumb, it looked like just went boom. And he literally shot the cork across the entire room right to me, which I'm guessing, like, is this something like a hidden skill or practice? Because, like, again, that's the vision I have. Which, to me, first off, you're celebrating this our success together. Like, this is you're helping me, you're encouraging. You didn't need to, like, you came out of your way. And I remember there was some McKinsey senior partners there that said, "Wait, you left the meeting early to come to Gary?" I remember
Well,
that.
I thought it was important, and my side of that story is if how many stories how many steps did I have to climb to get to that loft?
That is absolutely. There was a walk up. It's exactly right. It was a walk
And,
up.
and I was running
You
a
couldn't
little
afford the
late, so I
elevator.
think I
Yeah,
I think I did it a little bit double time. And so by the time I got in the room and went to open it, that champagne was ready, ready to
it's
go. And
awesome.
and I loved the name, right? It was all about energy and explosion, and it captured what you're still up to. So I
It's
was honored
amazing.
to be part of that.
It's amazing. So Don, transitioning a little bit, like when you were at Citi, a hot topic for us was always infrastructure. And I know you're an advisor within hyperscalers, and I believe Google would be one of the places I've seen you recently. And that's
Right.
so like there's a whole conversation happening around the cost of the cloud, the migration costs, the and and what worries me is it's a dangerous conversation because it's very focused on the cost piece instead of the value piece, the strategy piece. The I was always the one to say, like, that's great. Like, if someone could do something better than we can, why wouldn't we step out of the way and let them do it? Like, that's kind of like the whole Concur mobile app as well, which is if someone already built it, why are we recreating the wheel? Let's just use it and it gets us to market faster. And that's kind of the way I view cloud, which is like, is it strategic for you to have a data center? Is it like, and I'm just curious, like, are you hearing on the boards you're on, is that also like same conversations? And what's your thoughts or advice to anyone in that conversation to say, how do you think through a business case on migration to the cloud, whether it's even, private cloud or I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that.
That's a really multi-part question and I'll try to answer it. But I think you're right. People are looking at the economics behind the cloud. There is some what I'd call surprise pricing. That's into some of the cloud providers. There's always going to be the tension: is it better to do it yourself or to do it up on someone's cloud? For the most part, it's always going to be cheaper at a scale basis, right? We all know that, and most people can't have that kind of scale. So the economics should be better in a cloud than in a non-cloud. And most of the other issues around security that were stumblers up front have now proven to go the other way. And as you said, I am an advisor to one of the cloud providers. So I put that out there as kind of to be upfront and transparent. But I really think that it is always worth revisiting the model, what you have. Hopefully, the way it's constructed in compute technology today, you're not going to be limited to one solution set. You're going to have the flexibility to move around, particularly as your business moves around. But I do think it all comes down to data, right? And this is what you've taught me is the data is, it is the fuel, right? And so I've always thought about the continuum of value creation that starts with data, turns data to information, information to knowledge, and knowledge to insight. And obviously, insight is then what you move into an action. So on a trading floor would be the trade. At a big box, it would be the sale. Whatever that is, what does that value stream look like? And for most of the compute world that I've lived through, and I've lived through a lot of it, it has been at the left-hand side, the data side, turning data to information. But it's really at this stage turning it into insights to action. And I really think the best way to do that is to organize data as quickly and as thoroughly as you possibly can and as safely as you can, and then start trying to get the insights that can lead to action. And I really think we're in a wonderful position today with AI helping us, large language models helping us to fray a lot of the heavy lifting. We're in a position I never thought we'd get to in terms of cost structure. Moore's law is alive and well and thriving. Metcalfe's law is alive and well from the telecom. So we're really in a position where every business is in a place to thrive, and I hope they don't get stuck back on how do you those economics. They should really be picking partners based upon who is it that can help them with the analytics to get the insights to help their grow their business and their customer base and that customer, the customer satisfaction. So a lot
I
in that
love it.
answer, but there was a lot in that
No,
question.
I think, and what you're also setting up is like the whole LLM conversations and the whole AI conversations. Data is the most critical fuel for that whole concept. You need data, you need actions. Like, yes, you could take a PDF and scan it in and get insights from it, but it's not going to be structured well. It's not going to be something scalable. And like to me, that is, I agree completely. Data is always the focus, and I like the view from the collection all the way through the insights and then action as the final step,
Yeah,
which
I
is
think it's
take the action.
every business is going to have to rethink the way it works. I'm going to a board meeting next week, and we're having a Harvard professor teach us a case, but the case has to be done through homework. I was up doing it last night, where you're downloading, ChatGPT 4, and you're doing the case in there, and then you're going to have to come into the board meeting with answers, right? So we're actually using that to drive board members to make sure that they are up to speed on the art of the possible, and then you can start thinking about, well, what's the underlying case actually about? But now you've got so much more information around you that there's a high odds you're going to have better outcomes.
I just had this other vision as you said that. If you Another Don moment for me at City was when iPad 1 came out. It just came out. No one knew even
Yeah,
what a tablet was. And I remember you saying, we're going to move the board meeting content to the iPad and every board member will access it. And this is before Boardvantage existed, before
right.
Diligent, before all these. And I had to create with our team. We created a 256-bit salt key that encrypted a magazine. I don't know if you remember the whole, we did it. It actually was
Yeah,
accomplished and we did it. But if you add the AI onto that now, it could simply be we've uploaded it and you have it. And by the way, here's the questions you should ask in the board meeting because we have the insights from it. Like we actually understand what they're like. It's funny. I like the cartoon where it shows on one side the person's going, look how cool this is. I took these three bullets and a ChatGPT wrote this entire email. And then the other side, the person goes, look, I got this whole email and ChatGPT took these down to the three bullets. It's like, that's kind of what it would be with board is like, but that's amazing. Don, look, I can't thank you enough for continuing to always be there for advice and friendship and just support and for me, for my team. And I gotta ask, any last piece of advice, favorite book, favorite thing, what would you say last piece for the audience that you would leave them with? Any
favorite book. I'll just turn around real time. Uh,
Outlive the Science
okay,
of Longevity. Okay, Peter. Okay, awesome.
if you
Awesome.
have a chance, Peter is a great author. You could also tie in, but it's really about living a healthy life and being vibrant and making sure you're doing things that I never thought about in the middle of my career. I gave sleep a second position. Now it's stuff like getting the right amount of REM because it's the Zamboni that clears your head. And then I'd say the other thing is, be a lifelong learner. I try to read a book a week at a minimum, and I try to make sure it's never in the same thread, right? It's always going to be maybe a history, maybe science, whatever. So just keep learning because and have fun. Life is super short. So having fun and everything, the approach I have is, really enjoy every day. I'll leave it at that. It's just
I
such a
love it.
pleasure to
Have
be with
fun.
you.
Enjoy every day. Yeah,
Take
Don, this
care.
is a pleasure again. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.